Hey there, sports history fan. Arnie Chapman here from the Sports History Network. Now, before you jump into this episode, I wanted to share with you an exciting giveaway we have going on with Home Field Apparel. We have a digital $50 gift card to homefieldapparel.com for one lucky fan of the Sports History Network. All you got to do is head over to sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways to sign up. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways. This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
He was the quarterback for one of the most dominant teams in football history. He played the game for 10 years, and 10 times he led his team to the championship game, and he won it 7 times. Over the course of 4 years, his teams only lost 4 games, and yet, when the conversation rolls around to who is the greatest quarterback in football history, his name is rarely, if ever, mentioned. Next, on Sports Forgotten Heroes, we're going to take a look back at one of the most overlooked superstars in football history, Otto Graham.
This is Sports Forgotten Heroes, a tribute to the stars who shaped the games we love to watch and the games we love to play. Stars who provided us with many thrills, but when their time was up, they faded away. We'll take a look back at their spectacular careers, their moments of fame, even if it was just for one season or just one game. And now, here's your host, Warren Rogan.
Hello and welcome to Sports Forgotten Heroes, episode number 128, Otto Graham. It amazes me to think that over the course of his 4-year AAFC career and his 6-year NFL career, Otto Graham played in the championship game every single year. He won the championship 7 times. He was named the NFL MVP 3 times. His overall career record as a starting quarterback is 104 wins, 17 losses, and 4 ties. He led the NFL in completion percentage 3 times, yards twice, passer rating twice, and yards per game twice. Oh, he also played defensive back and returned kickoffs and punts for a period of time as well. And again, with all of that, when the conversation comes around to the greatest of all time, quarterbacks like Tom Brady, Joe Montana, Johnny Unitas, John Elway, Peyton Manning, and others are always discussed long before the name of Otto Graham is mentioned. Why? The numbers tell a huge story, and every one of them should put Graham at or near the top. Joining me today to talk about Graham is Ken Crippen from the Football Learning Academy. Ken has long been a proponent of Graham's. He also thinks that Otto Graham is unfairly overlooked and needs to be in the discussion of the GOAT way more than he is. And by the way, Graham didn't play football until his sophomore year at Northwestern University. He was a terrific athlete. He was discovered playing intramural football when he wasn't on the basketball court for the Wildcats. Yeah, he was a terrific basketball player too. In fact, he played professionally for the Rochester Royals, now the Sacramento Kings. Before we get to today's episode, remember, you can follow Sports Forgotten Heroes on X at SportsFHeroes. I post there every day. Please give Sports Forgotten Heroes a follow as I try to build that community, and you can also follow on Facebook. Hey, now you can also watch on YouTube. That's right, every episode is now recorded for YouTube. I always add photos, stats, and more. Check out the Sports Forgotten Heroes channel on YouTube, and please give it a follow as well. And as always, I thank you for your support. So, Otto Graham. He was drafted by the Detroit Lions. However, before he ever stepped onto a professional football field, he served his country first. Then he opted to bypass the NFL and signed up to play with Paul Brown and the Cleveland Browns in the newly formed All-America Football Conference. And while many think the competition in the AAFC was inferior, those who do couldn't be further from the truth. And here to talk more about the AAFC and Otto Graham from the Football Learning Academy is Ken Crippen. Ken, welcome to Sports Forgotten Heroes. I am so happy you can join.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I know that we've been trying to get together for a while, and I'm really excited to have you.
Well, it's great that we're able to get together.
Yes, yes. And what a great topic, Otto Graham. And I'm going to start with this. You know, when you look back at the history of the NFL and you talk about the greatest quarterbacks who ever played, Otto gets lost in there. Usually you're talking about guys like Unitas, Namath, Marino, Montana, Elway, Brady, and now Mahomes has entered the conversation. But when it comes to Otto Graham, why do you think a guy like that gets lost in the conversation?
I think there's multiple reasons. One is he played too long ago, so people just forget about it. They also like to discount his years in the All-America Football Conference, which to me, doesn't hold water as somebody who's studied the All-America Football Conference. They say it's lesser talent, and I completely disagree with that. But I think those are the main reasons why Otto gets lost. And the fact that people putting together the lists nowadays, chances are they never watched any video of him playing or anything like that. So they really have no idea how good he really was.
Well, he was spectacular. I mean, you take a look at some of those numbers. As an NFL quarterback, Otto Graham was 57, 13, and 1. He was the league MVP 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
He had a quarterback rating of 86.6. He led the Browns to the NFL championship 3 times. Now, you go back and you add the AAFC, the All-America Football Conference, where he was 47, 4, and 3, and won all 4 of the league's championships. And his numbers really fly off the charts. Just how good was he?
Amazing. I mean, you look at his completion percentage. He was top 5 in completion percentage every year that he played, all 10 years. He led the league 4 times in completion percentage and was second place 3 times. So 7 of the 10 years, he was either first or second in completion percentage. That shows you the type of accuracy that he had. But if they're saying, well, it's just short passes, he still holds the NFL record for yards per pass attempt for his career. NFL record at 9 yards. He's third all time in yards per pass completion. So I don't want to hear that he was just, throwing short passes, and that's why his completion percentage was so high. He's got a better career winning percentage than Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes, 2 people you just mentioned. He won the same number of championships as Tom Brady, but he did it in half the amount of time. Tell me that's not dominance.
It is. It's just his numbers. They're just like I said earlier. They are literally off the charts. There's no quarterback that I can think of that can rival some of the numbers that Otto Graham put up. And it just amazes me, as you said, you think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he played so long ago. But there are other players whom we discuss, guys like a Sammy Baugh or a Y.A. Tittle. I hear sometimes even Charlie Connerly, I guess, because I'm a big Giants fan. Mm-hmm. But I hear about these quarterbacks from way back when, and sometimes I think to myself, gosh, Why do we talk about them? And again, Otto Graham's name gets lost out there. It's just a hard one for me to grasp.
Yeah, I don't understand it either. I mean, when you look at Sammy Baugh, I mean, he could do everything. I mean, you're talking about somebody who was an incredible passer, but then also, he's playing defensive back. He's a punter. I mean, he's able to excel at everything that he was doing. Otto Graham, I mean, he played both ways. I mean, he was a defensive back when he played. Wasn't, to the same level as, say, like a Sammy Baugh, but still, it's, he was able to be so good on offense that it didn't really matter that he wasn't as good on defense, and they didn't need him to be that good on defense. But he was just dominant. And like you said, there's a lot of quarterbacks out there that are not really getting the recognition that they deserve, whether it's Sammy Baugh, whether it's Y.A. Tittle, you mentioned Connerly. I mean, there's a bunch of guys that you can be talking about outside of the Unitises and Montanas, and then now you got the recency bias of going with, the Mahomes and the Tom Brady's and stuff like that. There's a lot of people out there, and we're really forgetting the history of this game by ignoring some of these players.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Otto was actually drafted with the 4th pick in the 1944 draft by the Detroit Lions, but he never played for the Lions. Can you take us through that period of time, why he never played for Detroit, and how he ultimately wound up in the AAFC, a startup league with the Cleveland Browns?
Yeah, a lot of players were leaving to serve overseas in World War II. So you saw a lot of upheaval within the National Football League and even some of the rival leagues that tried to form at that time. So Otto Graham, he, enlisted in the Coast Guard. And then he was going through the different collegiate programs that they had for training people in preparation for shipping overseas. So he actually played, at the Carolina Pre-Flight, and some guy named Paul Bear Bryant, you've probably heard of him. He was coaching there at that time, so he played under Bryant. And then he played against Paul Brown when Paul Brown was coaching Ohio State. He beat Ohio State that year, and that was the only loss of the season that the team had.
Wow.
So he got Paul Brown's attention as early as 1941 when Otto Graham was playing in college. And so when he came back from the war, Paul Brown definitely wanted him, even though in 1944, Graham was drafted by the Lions. He was serving overseas, so he wouldn't be playing at the time. But when he came back, Paul Brown offered him a contract. It was $7,500 a year. And he definitely wanted to be with Paul Brown. So he did show up a little late to training camp, and as a result, he didn't start the first game of the 1946 season. Cliff Lewis started that, but after that, it was all Otto Graham. And, we know the success that he had when he was playing in the All-America Football Conference, and then once he got to the NFL.
Yeah. Hey, let's stick with the military for a second, just real quick. Do you know if Otto ever served time overseas, or was he strictly like in the cadet pilot training program?
As far as I know, it's always been the cadet programs, doing pilot training, doing other type of training. He never went overseas, like I said, as far as I know, but in the research that I've done, it's all been going to different colleges and universities in this area in the United States for the pilot training.
Let's go back even a step farther. He was a superior athlete, and he loved basketball, probably his favorite sport. In fact, he attended Northwestern University on a basketball scholarship and played professionally in a league that was known at the time as the National Basketball League, which ultimately merged with the Basketball Association of America and now is the NBA. But he played for the Rochester Royals. And here's a little tidbit that I'm not sure many people know. Otto Graham is one of only 2 professional athletes to win a championship in 2 professional sports. The Royals, whom he was a member of, won the NBL title in 1946, and obviously, as we've stated a couple of times, he won so many times in the AAFC and the NFL. Incidentally, the other player was Gene Conley, who pitched for the Milwaukee Braves when they won in the World Series in '57. And then later, or at the same time, actually, he played both sports at the same time, one with the Celtics. And I actually did a podcast on Gene way back when, episode number 26. But back to Graham. He didn't play football in college until his sophomore year. How was he discovered? How did the coach, Pappy Waldorf, discover him? And what did he see in Otto Graham that thought he would be a decent quarterback?
Well, Otto was playing intramural football at the time. Wasn't playing varsity, junior varsity, or anything like that. Well, like you'd said, Pappy Waldorf, who was the coach of the Northwestern team, saw him throwing the football and says, "Hey, why don't you come out and try out for the team?" So he said, "Okay, we'll try out for the team." And he made the team. And what was interesting is the first game that he played for Northwestern, he started off by returning a punt 90 yards for a touchdown. And he also ran and passed for 2 more touchdowns in that same game.
Wow.
So he made an immediate impact.
Those were some of Northwestern's better teams. I mean, how good was Northwestern back then? And how good was Otto Graham in college?
I mean, he was pretty good. I mean, he definitely won some accolades. He was All-American, I think, one year. And he definitely made an impression when he was in college. Even though, like you said, it wasn't his favorite sport. He played professional, like you said, for the Rochester Royals, who are now the Sacramento Kings. And
Sure.
he wasn't expecting that football was going to be his career. He figured, if anything, it was going to be basketball.
Yeah, he didn't get much playing time with the Royals. He was with them, but he certainly made his mark on the gridiron.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say he definitely made a mark on the gridiron. So when he came back and was ready to play professional football, that's when he signed with Paul Brown, and the rest is history.
I just want to explore that signing a little bit more. He liked Brown. He wanted to play for Brown. But how do you turn your nose up to the NFL for a startup league like the AAFC? Was there a money factor included in this? Just why would you go to the AAFC, and who was the quarterback for the Lions at that time? And did Otto think, well, I'm just never going to get a chance to start in Detroit?
I mean, honestly, I don't know if Detroit even offered him a contract. I'm guessing they probably did. They tried to sign him since they drafted him.
Mm-hmm.
But, Paul Brown offered him $7,500 a year. There were a lot of former NFL people who are going to be playing in the All-America Football Conference. So, it's definitely attractive, and especially when, he's not really looking to say that he's going to have a long, extensive professional football career. $7,500 a year is pretty good. So he decided to take the money and just go from there. And obviously it worked out for him.
Well, he goes to play for the Browns in the AAFC. And you said earlier that so many people think that the AAFC just was inferior, but you don't believe that. And I know that you've done a lot of work about the AAFC. And there were like there are in the NFL, certainly some inferior teams, but there were also some pretty good teams in the AAFC. The San Francisco 49ers being one of them. The New York Yankees were a decent AAFC team. And of course, the Browns. Can you tell us a little more about the competition in the AAFC and who some of the stars were? Because, like I said, the AAFC was not inferior.
Yeah, I've interviewed several people, a lot of people actually, who played in both leagues. Every single one of them said that the All-America Football Conference was at least on par with the NFL, if not better. And they'd always point to the Cleveland Browns as a reason why they would be better than the NFL. I had one person, the only thing that I heard that could be negative was one person that told me and said the better teams in the All-America Football Conference were better than the better teams in the NFL, but the worst teams in the All-America Football Conference were worse than the worst teams in the NFL. So he said that there's a larger disparity in the talent that was there. And there were some bad teams in the All-America Football Conference. There's no doubt about that. But there was also some bad teams in the NFL too.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're looking at it, the Cleveland Browns, I guess because they were so dominant over that entire period, that people just automatically assume that, yeah, there was no other talent in that league other than the Cleveland Browns. And when the Cleveland Browns came into the NFL in 1950, they figured, okay, the NFL is going to teach the Browns a lesson. We have our two-time NFL champion Philadelphia Eagles. We're going to match them up with them on the first game of the season, and we're just going to show everybody how much the NFL is really going to dominate over the All-America Football Conference. It didn't go the way that the NFL had planned because the Browns won that game. And when the Browns played them again later in the season, they again beat the Philadelphia Eagles and then went on to win the championship. So it pretty much showed that the Browns were definitely on par with anybody in the NFL, and they proved it, that they were beating the two-time champion Philadelphia Eagles. And then you saw, they still won several more championships. They were in the championship game for the next, several years, the next 6 years, and they won 3 of them.
Right.
So you can't tell me that they were inferior. And when you look at some of the stars that were in there, I mean, you've got Hall of Famers coming out of there. I mean, just you look at Cleveland, there's a whole bunch of Hall of Famers there, but you had, people that played on other teams. You had, guys like Tom Landry was playing in the All-America Football Conference. Yeah, he made his name as a coach, but that's where he started his playing career. And then, you've got Spec Sanders, you got Frankie Albert. I'm a big fan of Frankie Albert with the San Francisco 49ers. He was an unbelievable talent. Spec Sanders, like I said, Glenn Dobbs. There was a bunch of people in there that were incredibly talented. And like I said, there were a bunch of Hall of Famers that came out of there as well. So the talent was there. And when the two leagues, quote unquote, merged in 1950, the NFL was trying to suck up all the talent that they could. They had an allocation draft in order to take all of that talent from the All-America Football Conference and put it onto NFL rosters to improve their rosters. So to say that the talent wasn't on par with the NFL, but then wanting to get all the players from the All-America Football Conference on their rosters because they said that's going to improve their roster, I mean, that kind of tells you something.
Well, that's another question I have. I mean, Graham wound up being the AAFC's all-time leading passer with over 10,000 yards and 85 touchdowns over 4 seasons. And then the AAFC folded after the 1949 season. And the Browns were one of the teams absorbed by the NFL. Talk about the teams that did go to the NFL, very few, and how did that go down? Why did a team like the Browns, why were they allowed to keep their roster intact?
It was mainly when you brought in the 49ers, you brought in the Browns, and you brought in the Baltimore Colts. So they were able to keep their rosters the way they were, and they became part of this draft and were able to pick up some talent from other teams. So those are the only three that came in. Baltimore Colts, originally, they didn't want them to come in because they were talking about territorial rights with Washington that was there, and they didn't want Baltimore coming in as competition. But then a bunch of money happened to find its way to George Preston Marshall, and then all of a sudden his opinion changed and said, yeah, it'd be great to have Baltimore in the league. So that's how those three teams came in. You talk about the Buffalo Bills. That's a team that I've studied a lot, and they were close to coming into the NFL at that time, especially instead of Baltimore. But there was a lot of stuff that went on behind the scenes that prevented Buffalo from coming into the National Football League at that time. And, it definitely had an impact because Buffalo was a pretty strong team in 48. They were playing in the championship game. In 49, they were playing in the championship game. They weren't at the same level as the Cleveland Browns, but they were still a talented team. Some of the issues that they faced was that, one, their owner decided to give up. He didn't want to own the team anymore. So it went to a public coalition similar to what the Packers have.
Mm-hmm.
And they tried to fight to get the team into the NFL. One of the things the NFL did was they said that, well, no, we have to have one person that essentially speaks on behalf of the franchise, and you have to have that one owner that's going to do that. Next thing is they were claiming that weather was going to be a problem because of being in Buffalo. It's like, well, okay, you've got Green Bay, you've got New York City. I mean, and they even showed us like the weather's worse in those cities than it is in Buffalo, but that didn't hold too much water. And then the final thing came down to a schedule. Bert Bell, who was the NFL commissioner at the time, said that he was going to release a schedule that had Buffalo on it because he knew the other owners were going to want to see that schedule to know where their team would be playing and when. It gets to the league meetings, Bert Bell never provides that schedule. And so Dan Reeves, who was the owner of the Rams, he said, I don't have a schedule. I don't know where my team's playing, so I vote no. And all it took was one no vote, and Buffalo was out. They weren't considered at all. So there was a few other people that ended up voting no after that, but all it took was that one, and it's because Bert Bell didn't do what he said he was going to do, which was provide that schedule. No idea why he didn't provide that schedule. I talked to his son, Upton Bell, about it. He didn't know why the schedule was never provided, but it was never provided, and that essentially killed Buffalo's chances of coming into the NFL in 1950.
And then, obviously, they were resurrected in a different way, but they were resurrected in the AFC, or the AFL, I mean.
Right.
Now, you touched upon this, too, the fact that the Browns proved just how tough they were by beating the Eagles twice after they won that fourth AAFC championship. And they held their own. Did the NFL, after that had happened, did the NFL ever say, wow, maybe these AAFC teams are or were that good? Because that's when the league folded. That's when the NFL absorbed the AAFC. Did they think that San Francisco was an inferior product? And Baltimore, I don't think, jumped to the NFL right away.
They did. They were in there in 1950, lasted one season, and they were done.
Oh, that's what it was. So yeah, I knew there was something happened, that there was something with Baltimore, that they either didn't make it the first year or they played 1 year and that was that.
Yeah, they played the 1 year, and that was that. And then you see the whole Dallas Texans thing in '52, and then '53 the Baltimore Colts that are now the current Indianapolis Colts. So separate franchises, but yeah, the Colts were there for 1 year, but they pretty much discounted San Francisco and Baltimore, especially Baltimore, because they really weren't that good. San Francisco was the only one that would come close to being on par with the Browns, but the Browns were so dominant that really that's all that they talked about. And there was no way that the NFL was going to admit that the All America Football Conference was a legitimate league. So they still tried to discount it, but I think the Browns just proved it on the field that, yeah, they were better than anybody else, and the NFL was scared.
Now, that's a really good point, Ken. And I don't mean to diverge so much from Otto, but it all does play into just how good a quarterback Otto Graham was. It was sort of like a merger, right? The AAFC merged with a couple of teams and all those players into the NFL. Yet the NFL doesn't recognize the AAFC playing records of those players who played in both leagues.
Right.
But they do recognize the records of the players who played in the AFL. Their numbers are counted on their all-time stats, as AFC teams now. Why is that? Why does the NFL not recognize, to the best of your knowledge, because you've done a lot of research, to the best of your knowledge, why does the NFL not recognize the numbers accumulated in the AAFC?
The official reason is that the official score sheets for the All-America Football Conference were never turned over to the NFL when the quote-unquote merger happened. And so as a result, they don't have the official statistics. Now, not all of the official score sheets exist. It was probably about 10 or 15 years ago. Pete Palmer, a historian, he was able to track down the official score sheets, the copies, the real copies of them, from a guy that basically took them out of a dumpster. So me, Pete Palmer, and Joe Horrigan all got together and we purchased that from the person that owned them. So we are the three people that have copies of what remain of the AAFC score sheets, the official sheets.
Wow.
Not all of the games are there. And so as a result, even if we were to turn all of this stuff over to the NFL, it is not 100% complete. So as a result, they're not going to accept any of those statistics. So that is the official message coming out of the NFL.
Wow. That's a shame, because if you were to add some of those numbers to Otto's stats, they really would be off the charts. And, same with the Browns, right? They'd have that many more championships, because when they move from the AAFC, as you said, when they move from the AAFC to the NFL, they just continued to win. What can you tell us about that first season that the Browns did have, that Otto Graham did have in the NFL? I mean, they went 10-2, and they beat the Los Angeles Rams 30-28 in their first season in the NFL championship game. What can you tell us about that first season that just goes to show just how great and dominating this team and that quarterback were?
Well, I mean, as we were talking about earlier, they played the two-time NFL champion Philadelphia Eagles. And, there's a little bit of a myth, but maybe not a myth when it comes to the second game that they played. The Browns beat on the Eagles pretty good. And so Greasy Neal had made some comments. All they do is throw the ball, stuff like that. So then they talk about the second game where there wasn't a single pass thrown in that game. So I just want to clarify on that there was a pass thrown, but it was negated due to a penalty. So the official box score shows that there were no passes thrown. But just to make sure that we officially have the record out there that there was one pass attempt, but it was negated for a penalty. But yeah, I mean, 10-2, like you said, for that year, beating the Rams. The Rams went on to win the championship the next year. They beat the Browns in that championship game. But to come into the league when the league already thinks that, you're a lesser team, and to come in and dominate like that, and to dominate the entire season, 10-2, that makes a statement. And I think, another statement too, and I don't want this to get lost too, is that they were the first major league professional football team to have an undefeated season and win a championship. Everybody talks about the Miami Dolphins of 72. They also did it, but they were the second ones to do it. Think about this. 1947, Browns lose one game. Go on, win the championship. Went through all of the 1948 season, win the championship. Lose one game in 1949, win the championship. They won 29 straight games without a defeat.
Wow.
29.
I don't care what kind of competition you're playing against. That is incredibly impressive.
They win more championships than they lost games. Name another team in history that can do that over a period of time. You look at the Patriots of the 20-year dynasty that they have. They never did that. No. The Cowboys and the Steelers in the 70s, the 49ers in the 80s and 90s. You got the Cowboys in the 90s. None of those that won multiple championships. None of them. The Packers, they never did it. And they're the only team that did two three-peats in their history. They did it in the 20s and 30s, and then they did it again in the 60s under Lombardi.
Yeah.
They never did it.
No.
So think about that for a second. How is it that you can have a team that was that dominant and just be absolutely dismissed?
Yeah, it's crazy because if you go back and you look, and I did the research, I look back at the NFL. Obviously, we know 72, the Dolphins, the perfect season, 17-0, they win the Super Bowl. The Patriots had that phenomenal year where they went 16-0, won their 2 playoff games, but they lost to the Giants in the Super Bowl. Then you got to go way back. The Bears went 11-0 in 1942. They lost the championship. They went 13-0 in 1934. They lost the championship. The Browns, 14-0 in 1948. They won their championship. So in reality, the Cleveland Browns of 1948 and the Miami Dolphins of 1972 are the only 2 teams that ever went through a season completely unscathed. And the Browns don't get the recognition. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's because they discount the All-America Football Conference.
What was the game like? You sort of alluded to it that the Browns were a passing team and they had to prove themselves by not passing the ball in the second game against the Eagles. What kind of team were the Browns? How innovative was Paul Brown? And was the entire AAFC as innovative and, I'm going to use this term loosely, pass happy as the Cleveland Browns were?
I would say it depends on the team as to whether they were as pass happy or not. I mean, you got teams that had Glenn Dobbs, Spec Sanders, Frankie Albert, all guys that I mentioned earlier. Those are the ones that are going to be passing the ball. And when you have somebody like a Glenn Dobbs or a Spec Sanders, they're going to run with the ball as well. So you've got that dual threat going on with Frankie Albert. He was amazing with ball handling skills. So the play action pass was incredibly effective for them. The Browns were a complete team. Yeah, they threw the ball a lot, but you got people like Marion Motley in the backfield. You're going to run the ball as well. And their defense was also incredible. You look at Bill Willis, you look at Marion Motley, you look at a lot of the guys that they had on that defense, they had a pretty good defense as well. So that's how you go undefeated, and that's how you go 4 years with only losing 4 games, and you win 4 championships. So, yeah, they threw the ball a lot, and Graham was very good at throwing it. We talked about statistics earlier about his completion percentage, and yet it wasn't all short passes. He was throwing the ball down the field. But he had incredible skills. I mean, you saw him when he was scrambling in the backfield. You can tell that he was picking up a lot of the stuff that he was learning in the other sports he played. He played basketball, he played baseball. So he was picking up some of those skills from that in order to be able to move around in the backfield. But yet you'd look at his accuracy. It doesn't matter whether, he's got both feet planted, whether he's throwing off of his back foot, whether he's throwing on the run. He was incredibly accurate. And he was always looking downfield, and he was always quickly going through his progression. So you can see that he wasn't just, tossing the ball out there, that he was truly managing the game, and he was a field general out there controlling everything that was going on. That's what made him such a special player, is that he was able to do all of that.
He was just a smart guy, period, was he not?
Mm-hmm.
And his aptitude for all of this is just phenomenal when you consider he didn't play football until his sophomore year of college. How
Mm-hmm.
unique is that? Just how unique is it that a guy never plays the game and has this kind of success as such a late starter?
Yeah, you've seen it occasionally with somebody who's only played 1 or 2 years in college, but it's pretty rare. And to have that at the quarterback position, I don't know of many other people throughout NFL history, at least, recent history, that has ever happened, where they've only played 1 or 2 years in college, and then now they're a Hall of Fame quarterback, considered one of the greatest of all time. To me, that's just incredibly special, and it shows just the athleticism that he had, that you can be a basketball player, you're now a quarterback. You see it a lot, guys who played a lot of basketball in high school and college, they're coming out, playing tight end, playing receiver, different positions, but not as much with quarterback. Usually you see a quarterback that has gone through, played a lot in high school, played a lot in college, and that's how they make it into the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
So that, to me, is pretty special.
Obviously, we just watched Mahomes do something very special, winning his 3rd Super Bowl championship. And it sort of seems like he's playing for a championship every year. And you mentioned this too, how often Otto Graham played for a championship. Now, to me, this here is one of the most incredible stats in football history. Just bear with me for a second. 1946, 47, 48, 49, the Browns win the AAFC championship. 1950, they win the NFL championship. In 51, 52, and 53, they lost the NFL championship. 54, they beat the Lions. 55, they beat the Rams. And if you're counting, that's 10 years that he played in the between the AAFC and the NFL. 10 years. That's all he did. 10 years as a professional football player, quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. 10 years. He was in the championship 10 years. He played 10 years, played for the championship 10 times, and won 7 of them. That's it, man. Arguably the most demanding position in all of sports. He played in the championship every year. Sure, you have to have other great players on your team, but 10 years, 10 appearances. I'm not sure there's anything like that in any other sport. What does that say about Otto Graham? And again, I got to go back and ask the question. How is he not in the conversation for the greatest of all time?
Yeah, a lot of recency bias. I mean, people look at Tom Brady, say he's the greatest of all time. Otto won the same number of championships that Tom has won, did it in half the time. Tom Brady didn't go to 10 straight championship games. You saw how great Tom Brady was. You saw the dominance that Tom Brady had. You see everybody put him as the greatest of all time. Otto Graham did better than Brady. But like you said, he doesn't get the recognition. They put him, you see him on lists, and they'll have him like 10 or 15 or 20 or something like that on the greatest list. How can you be that far down the list when the people that you have at the very top, he performed better than them?
Yeah, I don't get it. Do you think maybe it has something to do with the fact that he only played 10 years? They were 10 spectacular years, but he only played 10. There wasn't a longevity factor to his greatness. He retired at the age of 34. A lot of guys, Brady, they play much longer than Otto did. What gives? Why did he retire at such an early age?
Well, he didn't really want to play the 1955 season. He actually went out to his insurance business and was going to continue doing that. Paul Brown convinced him to come back for 1955 because during training camp, they saw that, things were not going well. So I said, okay, can you come back and play another year? So he said, okay, we'll come back. I'll play another year, wins a championship, and then goes off into the sunset. But you also take a look, too, at when Otto Graham was not in the lineup, and he played. I mean, he wasn't out injured, but when he left, the team just kind of fell off the map. So some people say, well, he's just a system quarterback. I hate hearing that.
No.
He's a system quarterback. How did the team just self-destruct when he wasn't there?
No, yeah, exactly. It's funny because you look, I always say that a guy like Joe Montana was a system quarterback. It's just a funny thing. Yeah, no, the guy was spectacular. He leaves the game, but he still had a knack, a love for the game, and he went on to coach college football at the Coast Guard from 1959 through 1965, and then again in 74 and 75. In between, he was the head coach of the Redskins, where he went 17 and 22. What were his days like as an NFL coach? What kind of coach was he?
He was a strict coach. Players didn't really like that. So I think that, he may have come in and he did well in the beginning, but things would fall off as soon as they'd start seeing some losses. I mean, he was an effective coach. I mean, when you look at the fact that he was coaching the college all-star game, he was successful. He beat the Detroit Lions. And, these are teams that, you have got the college all-stars playing against the NFL champion. And they beat the NFL champion. They did it again when he beat the Packers in '63. And so, he did have some success as a coach, but Didn't have that success when he was in the NFL. And then, he was replaced by some guy named Vince Lombardi, when he came into Washington. So you're not going to compete against that.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we've discussed a lot about Otto, the Browns, the AAFC. Otto's greatness is undeniable. What one thing that maybe I haven't hit upon do you think we need to mention about Otto?
I would say people really need to actually watch him play. There's plenty of stuff on YouTube. You can go out there and watch how well he played and compare it to how other teams at the same era, how they played. There's plenty of that on YouTube as well. But just look at the skills that Otto Graham has. I mean, we talked a little bit about it before about, the accuracy that he had, the way he was able to go through all of his progressions and continually look downfield, even when he's being chased in the backfield. You'll see some guys just looking to throw it away. You'll see other guys just focusing on one receiver. He's still out there scanning the field. And that takes a special talent to be able to do that. So really focus on his play, and you'll see how great he really was.
He was elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1965. What's his legacy? How should he be remembered?
To me, he should be remembered as one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. That, he's got to be in that same conversation as the Tom Brady's of the world. Eventually, Mahomes is going to be in there as well. I know they're talking about it now, but to me, I would say give him a few more years, wins a couple of more championships, then put him in the conversation as well. Sammy Baugh, the Joe Montanas. He needs to be in that same conversation. I cannot see, even with the people that are playing now, how he cannot be in everybody's top 5 if you actually watched him play. To me, he's number 1. I got Brady as 2.
Well said.
Because,
and
then you look at, okay, who do you take after that? It's probably Montana. You've got Sammy Baugh. I mean, all of those guys are in that conversation, and that's what's filling out the top 5. I usually don't like rating people while they're still playing, which is why I don't include Mahomes. Let him finish his career, and then we'll rank him. But Otto Graham, to me, I don't see how you can not have him. I'd said top 5 before. How can he not be in the top 2? Even if you want to have recency bias and go with Tom Brady, how can you not have Otto Graham as number 2 if you've got Brady as number 1?
Tough argument. I wholeheartedly agree. When you just look at what he did, look at his numbers, look at the stats, the fact that he played in 10 championships in 10 years, won 7 of them, it's a very compelling argument for being, as they call it, the GOAT.
Exactly.
Ken, thank you so much for joining me on Sports Forgotten Heroes. Before you leave, please tell me a little bit more about your podcast and the Football Learning Academy.
Well, the Football Learning Academy, it's an online school teaching pro football history. What we want to do is take today's game and be able to put it into historical context, while at the same time having a platform to be able to help retired players in need. So a portion of all the proceeds that we generate at the Football Learning Academy go to help those retired players. It's something that's very important to me. Players have been great to me over the years, tons of interviews that I've done with them. I want to give back because I hear all this, the medical issues that they go through, the struggles that they go through. And, I want to do everything I can to give back to them. Podcast is an extension of the Football Learning Academy. It's the official Football Learning Academy podcast. You can find it on all your favorite podcast platforms. But what I try to do is when I bring in guests, whether it's former players, former coaches, former administrators, whoever, I want to be able to have people, kind of get under the helmet. They want to learn about the player themselves or the person themselves. What makes them tick? What are they doing since they retired from football? All of those things. So that's what I try to do with the podcast. And then there's a pro football history nugget of the week that we toss in there to still make sure we're always focused on football history and trying to toss those nuggets of information out there for people so that they can learn more about the game.
Awesome. Well, I wish you luck with all of that. I follow you. I think it's terrific. And I want to thank you again for joining me on Sports Forgotten Heroes to talk about Otto Graham.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, I guess you'll have to judge for yourself to determine whether or not you think Otto Graham should be in the discussion of the greatest of all time at quarterback. But the numbers don't lie. 10 years, 10 championship games, 7 titles. Like Ken said, it took a lot longer for Tom Brady to approach those numbers, and no one else has come close. Thanks again to Ken for sharing his time with us. Check out his podcast, The Football Learning Academy, and thanks to all of you for listening, and we'll see you next time on Sports Forgotten Heroes.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I wanted to thank you for stopping by to listen to another episode here on the Sports History Network. Our podcasters are passionate about uncovering and sharing sports stories from yesteryear. And if you didn't know it already, we have over 30 shows across the network covering all sorts of sports history topics. In fact, here's a glimpse into one of our awesome podcasts here on the network.
Each week, the official Football Learning Academy podcast will take you deep into the history of pro football through interviews with players, coaches, or administrators in the NFL, as well as interviews with Pro Football Hall of Fame selectors, authors, and historians. You'll learn how the game evolved and important moments that shaped the sport into what it is today. And don't miss the Pro Football History Nugget of the Week. Listen to the official Football Learning Academy podcast on the Sports History Network.
How about that? I bet you're super hyped to go listen to that new podcast, right? Well, to learn about this show and all the other podcasts on the network, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Head over there today to find your next favorite sports history podcast.